So we are recording now, and we're going live now. So, welcome everybody as we continue with our 19 days of Juneteenth with the Northeast Georgia Business Alliance. We are here with Wayne Cole, who is a product of the Clark County School District. And as I gave you the teaser last night and left you with, we are going to be talking about for Thrive Thursday in our 19 days of Juneteenth, education. Joe Madison, I don't know how many of you guys listen to him, but he always says education is the currency, the new currency for the 21st century. And so in order for us to thrive, education is really important. And so we have with us educator Wayne Cole, who, like I said, is Clark County School District. Go Jags. I have to say that. He's going to kill me because he is not a Jaguar, but we know the best school here, right? But as I bring Wayne on, I'm going to allow him to kind of introduce himself and tell us a little bit about his journey to get to education. And then we're going to dive in and really have a real conversation about where education is within our community. And when I say community, I really mean our much larger global community, not just here locally in Clark County. We're going to talk about even, and hopefully, we'll get into some of Wayne's experiences with where he sees a difference between Clark County and New York, where he is now. So Wayne, I'll let you unmute yourself and bring yourself on. And welcome everybody again to 19 Days of Juneteenth. And I have Mr. Wayne Cole.
So Michelle, as I started before, I want to first address that as a teacher, we experience technical difficulties in this time of remote teaching daily. So I want you to know that I applaud you for still smiling through it, because that's what we have to do.
Then yes, and I will say this, I don't do tech at all, just so y'all know. I got a cell phone and a computer.
We have a lot of teachers that struggle with tech, so it's okay. But then I want to say happy birthday to you. Thank you for your work. Thank you for being selfless and doing this work. And thank you to the Northeast Georgia Business Alliance, because putting our history out there is so important. And in this time that we're currently in, it's most important, right? Like, so many times we forget that we started in excellence, and through it all, we will do excellent and great things. So on to me. I am Wayne Cole. As she said, I am a product of the Clark County School District's Go Public School Education. I am a graduate of Clark Central High School, class of 2002, repping that. And I went on to get my college degree from Piedmont College, and my master's degree also from there. I want to thank Michelle for that, because she continued to push me as my big sister, like, go get it. You need to go get that education. And when I finished that master's degree, I moved to the Big Apple. I had an apple in my eye. I wanted to conquer it like everybody else. And I can say that it hasn't been that. Like, I really understand what people say, that if you can make it here, you can make it anywhere, because I came in with all kinds of misconceptions. But I am currently a teacher in the Bronx. I work for the New York City Public School, the New York City DOE, and I'm a teacher or educator at the Cinema School. It is a school that focuses on teaching kids about cinematography, from taking pictures to making short films, and still focusing on the core of education. So that's a little bit about myself. And I am a graduate of 2020 graduate of the Relay College of Education.
How special you had President Obama in doing your commencement address. Trust me, I was like, can I get a certification this year just so I can claim that too? But hey, I don't have time. So Wayne, I have to ask, with you, again, being in the education field, being a product of public school system here in Clark County, what do you think about your differences that you're seeing between what happened here locally in Clark County versus what you're seeing in New York? How does that translate to you as an educator? What does that feel like? What do you see?
There are so many differences, right? Like, I work in the Bronx, which is one of the most impoverished. It is actually, the Bronx has the most impoverished congressional district in the United States, right?
Wow.
And then I also live across the bridge, and across the bridge is Manhattan, where you have some of the most wealthiest school districts in the world, right? So here in the Bronx, or here in New York City, we have endless things and opportunities for the students, but I find that the students are they're very isolated in their neighborhood, so they don't get to see or they don't get exposed to a lot of the different things that are available to them in the city. And I know when I went to school in Athens, I had the opportunity of being a part of an excellent program called Upward Bound, and that exposed through Harriet Church. I was exposed to so much. Like she took us to New York. That's where I first got my first eye on the big city, and we went to places like DC. But she also taught us cultural things. She also taught us about how to behave outside of the environment we're used to. So and you also see, like, I also have to always remember that when I went to school in Athens, to me, it was a very diverse population, right?
Yeah.
But here you have about 90, I think about 85% minorities, so Black and brown people. So a lot of times they don't get exposed to people that don't look like them.
That's
So
interesting. So I'm going to pivot a little bit, and you
go
and I have had
ahead.
this conversation before, so I know you can hang with me. When you have such a concentration of any group, especially around culture, and your life revolves around a few blocks, everything, your school, where you go to church, where you're buying your groceries, then when you go out into the greater world outside of your few blocks and you're exposed to other cultures, what do you think that looks like for your students? Do you see them code switching? I know we were trained that, but I don't see that as much with this younger generation. Do you see them code switching? And if so, how are they adapting?
I will speak like I was fortunate to take a group of our students to DC in February, right before all this really came down. And, it was a diverse group of students, but they went to DC and they saw people that didn't look like them, and they saw people that were wearing magma hats and like just totally different from the dynamics that they see every day. And it was a bit of shock for them, right? Because when you are in a community where everything looks like you don't get introduced to code switching because there's really no need for it, right?
Yeah.
Like, and so code switching is not really they don't have the understanding of why code switching is necessary. And I still believe it is necessary in this time, but we have to work to teach our kids that there are things happening outside of their neighborhood that they have to be exposed to, right? And it's a part of the work that I do is exposing my kids not just to the academic side of education, but also to the social side of education, the emotional side of education. So
let me ask you this, because I do agree the exposure piece, but with the code switching side, is it that the students that are in this limited space need to learn a code switch, or do we collectively need to learn a code switch? Because I say that, and I'll just, at our core basics, we in America, we talk about black and white. So I'll just stay at this high level of black and white. And when we have black kids that understand their neighborhood, the culture that happens in their space, and we have white kids that understand their culture and what's happening in their space, if white kids aren't learning how to code switch, because for them that's the norm, and that's what we in America, we've accepted that as the norm, the white culture, so to speak. And so we all have to adapt. So do we really need to learn a code switch, or do we really need to learn how to actually live together and respect each other? And I say that, you know what I mean?
I think I don't want to get stuck in like trying to push our kids toward being politically correct. I think there's two sides to it. I think code switching is necessary in our own communities. Like code switching is the difference between the way you act at home and the way you act in a business, or the way you act in church, or the way you act at a party, right? Like code switching is still very important in my view. And I want to put out there that I am no expert. I am just a
neither
teacher.
am I.
I'm a teacher learning day by day. And
and I'm a financial advisor. We're having a conversation, people. I do want to say that because I know some people go to different extremes. So thank you for that disclaimer. And our conversation is us having a conversation around education in our talks. Honestly, people, this is the conversation that Wayne and I have regularly when we're sitting around. We talk like this to each other. But what we're doing, hopefully with Juneteenth, is just letting you in our living room to share this moment with us from all different walks of life. So thank you for saying that, Wayne.
Yeah, I think that's important because I always emphasize on that when I get into the classroom. I remember being that student looking up at my teachers and thinking, this person is perfect. They know all of their content, they know everything. And that was one of the major, hopefully later we can talk a little bit about fear, but like that was one of the major fears I had going into the classroom. I knew that I did not know everything. I knew that there were some things that I had forgotten, right? Like I started teaching at the age of about 33, and I hadn't picked up a textbook since I left grad school. Like, and
Wow.
it wasn't on the level of like a regular academic grad, work. It was more, the work you do in grad school is more critical thinking and so forth.
Right.
So trust me, I always acknowledge that I'm not an expert. I'm learning. And as a teacher, I'm flexible and always ready to learn.
Gotcha. So let me pivot and ask you in regards, especially as again the main topic of the core is education. And what are you noticing with our students collectively, again, across the board, when they do transition to these spaces that are outside their norm, outside of their block? Do they seem to be comfortable in those spaces, or versus in their classroom? Does that make sense? What I'm asking? When you leave, you're taking them on that field trip in DC. Do they realize they're in a different block, a different setting, and are they comfortable in that, or are we dropping the ball on our kids sometimes when we don't expose them to things like that?
Hey, I think it's a weird paradigm because our kids are comfortable wherever they go. And I
Good.
think that's an amazing thing. But then sometimes, they don't understand the need to look at things differently, to approach
Mm.
things different ways. So it's a battle, right?
Yeah.
And again, it's one of those things to why I believe exposure is so important, right? Like we don't get to take our kids out enough in the city.
Mm.
I'm in the Bronx, right? And New York City is huge. And think of they have access to so much in the city, but a lot of my kids do not. Rarely do
Mm.
they go down into the city. Rarely do they go down and see the things that Manhattan has to offer them, even different parts of the Bronx, let alone we're not talking about Queens or Brooklyn or Staten Island. So,
Right.
it is a magnitude of stuff that they just do not see.
Wow. You mentioned they don't have access to. Let me ask you a question, especially in this, our COVID environment taught us a lot and we had to pivot a lot, even with technology. And so I'm thinking about the FCC is bringing on the pipeline, and I don't get my terminology for verbatim and for fact, everybody, but basically charging you pay to play with internet service. So that's one of the things that's been on the table for over a year of how we have access to our broadband service. You can pay more for a faster speed, and if you can't afford it, you're not going to have it. So for me, as we talk about this conversation of education, if I am at home and I need to be on a phone, because some kids are, a laptop, whatever that is, but I need access, but Wi-Fi or at least some sort of internet service is going to be really important. And if I don't have access because my family can afford the $80, $100 plan that gives us, the high speed, super fiber, whatever 5G is coming out, then what does that say for me in my education? Because if I don't have access, what do I do? How do you see that playing out in the school system, even with service? And now also, even rewind a little, I don't even know, and I'm again channeling Clark County School District. I know we made access that kids had tablets and things like that. I don't know if, I'm sure that's not happening all across the country. So again, what do you see when it comes to access or lack thereof, just from your perspective as an educator?
So, with the spread of COVID-19, New York City schools were propelled into a space that they had never embarked in, like most school districts around the world and definitely around the United States. But what I did see is that they were quick to, like we have computers in our schools, right? But a lot of our students don't have them at home. And what happened is when we had to shut down so quickly, a lot of students, were depending on their cell phones to do all the things that they needed to do. But me as an educator, I looked at that and was like, this doesn't make sense, right? Our kids are going to be on their phones. Like I know they're used to being on their phones, right? But not for hours on end. Plus completing assignments by the phone. Like I just think
Yeah.
that's just injustice overall, right? But New York City was very big on getting iPads out that were readily already had Wi-Fi. They were
Mm.
Wi-Fi enabled. So we have kids who have struggled with Wi-Fi. That has been one of the major issues, right? They have it, but it's weak. And they have a problem with it every day. So that has limited them from
Wow.
having the interactions in the classroom. And I mean, I could go on and on about like how we were not prepared for this and how it makes you think that this is one of the things that needs to be given to people like healthcare, right?
Right.
Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
but I am praying that we get back to a classroom because I see the need and I see the desire for our kids to be back in classrooms interacting with their friends. So I'm praying that that is, not, Wi-Fi should still be available to them, but I'm praying that we're back in the classroom working and engaging with each other because I believe that
Right.
space is what's
Right.
best.
And this is Thrive Thursday, and you said something very key in there too, is that the students are thriving for the interaction with each other, with the educators. They're thriving for that too, because I think that also gives you a healthy mental space to be able to even deal with that because you have somebody that can relate to you, let alone your circumstances and what's going on around you. So yeah, I'm glad to hear that. My other question I would probably ask and pivot, and this because this is always a controversial topic. What are you seeing when it comes to charter school experiences in New York? And how do you think that affects even just again our collective education?
I am 100% against charter schools.
Okay.
I think the creation of them was uh, a criminal systematic hit to the educational system that we have. Um, I think it's sad when you think about it because if you look at how the money is sourced to charter schools, they're taking money out of the public school pot. And
Mm.
I am an advocate of all kids. I don't have any kids personally, but I do have 100 plus. All the students that I teach in my school building are my students,
Right.
and I'm sorry, but I'd be damned if I take anything out of one of their mouths to give more to another student, right? I'm for all of our students having everything that they need to be able to thrive, right? We're using Thrive Thursday. I want them to
Yep.
thrive, and I believe our kids have the ability to do so, but we need to put the resources that they need in front of them. So I am not a proponent of taking anything from my kids to give more to another kid, right? We need to invest more in education so
Yes.
all kids can have equity, right? Like we want
Yes.
equity across the board, not equal education, but equity, right? Because
Yes.
education for my kids in the Bronx does not look like an education for your kids in Georgia.
So you said equity, and it made me think about Dr. Bettina Love's book, We Want to Do More Than Survive. And I've heard her here locally because she was teaching at UGA and did a session, but we were at a dinner and she mentioned an excerpt from her book, and it was about, I think went viral years ago, and I have it pulled up, so I'm going to read. And it was pretty much all about journaling. And the young man in the classroom name was King Johnson. And when you talked about equity and how we treat each other in the I guess the realm of our cultural differences and experiences of how much we feel that. And this child, King Johnson, channeled it. So I'm going to read his journal entry and his teacher's response to it. And he said, "Today was not a good learning day. Blah, blah, blah. I only wanted to hear you not talking. You said something wrong, and I can't listen when I hear lies. My mom said that my mom said the only Christopher we acknowledge is Wallace because Columbus did not find our country. The Indians did. I like to have Columbus Day off, but I want you to not teach no lies. That is all. My question for the day is how can white people teach Black history?" And he signed his name, King Johnson. His teacher wrote, "King, I'm very disappointed in your journal today." His only simple response was, "Okay." And I read that because if you're talking about equity and what that looks like, one, I just have to say I love and channel everything about King Johnson. I wonder where he is now and how old he is because I could love to hang out with this kid. But when you're talking about equity, the one thing that I noticed when I read that was how the teacher looked over everything he said about you're teaching me lies. You're telling me something that is incorrect that I'm aware of. But the teacher's response did not address that at all. She just says, I'm disappointed in how you feel. I'm disappointed in your thinking process. That's how I interpreted how I felt that. Because, and I say that because we know that happens in education all the time. So as again, as an educator in your world, what does that say to you? How do you feel about that?
First, I want to start by saying sometimes educators need to get out of the classroom.
Mm, mm, mm.
When you're not doing the work and not feeding the needs of your students, it's time for you to go, right? I I I think it's so sad that that happens still to this day, right? I teach with a lot of white teachers who still have not gotten it right, right?
Mm.
But then I have to talk about myself, right? I still have to do the work to get it right, but I am trying to do the work to get it right, right? And that's what I call on them to do. At least attempt to do the work to get it right, right? It's not going to happen overnight. But I want to speak to what he was talking about and the lie about Christopher Columbus, which we've all known for a while. Thank God that Christopher Columbus did not discover what was already discovered and inhabited, right?
Right. Yes.
As a teacher, like I didn't come to teach. I wasn't a traditional teacher, right, Michelle? Like
Yeah.
I started subbing, right?
Mhm.
Found out that I like kids because, again, I tell you that I didn't think I liked kids. Um,
I'm on that
and
list.
right, like we bonded over this,
Yes.
right? But I found out that I'm thankful to God that He put me on a path to. I always listen to this song because I'm a gospel buff, but Daryl Coley sings a song about He's preparing me, right?
Mm.
And He has been preparing me for the work that I'm doing for a mighty long time, and I've been running from it, right? But I think about how He prepared me, right? He prepared me and He gave me foundational skills, or He gave me foundational pillars that my work stands on, right? And I wrote this now because like I was brainstorming what is this talk gonna be about, and I want to be prepared because I can't be a teacher that's not prepared. I hate to see a teacher that's not prepared, right?
Amen. Amen.
So first is accountability.
Mm.
When I get up in front of my students, I first tell them again that I'm not perfect, I make mistakes. But if I'm wrong, I'm gonna tell you I'm wrong, and I'm gonna go search for what's right. Next, I address misconceptions because
Mm.
if we don't address misconceptions, we ruin or we miss a chance to teach our kids things that they might have previously heard something else, right? So we have to address the misconception to let them know that what you heard is not right, but this is the right way, right? So I have to address the misconceptions because and misconceptions also go to mistakes, right? And in our errors, that's how we learn, right? When you go and you do a math problem and you thought you got it right because I love math, right? And I think I got it right, but then the person goes up to the board and they show me how it's done, and I see, oh, I did that wrong. But in that moment, I see where my mistake is. I see where my misconception is, and now I've learned. I've learned something, right? We don't necessarily learn when we already think we know something and we're just building on that. That's good too. But addressing the misconceptions is my second pillar. The third one is providing truth,
Mm.
right? Like if you sit up in front of your students and you don't address the fact that what that boy said was right, you see how you end education? You ended it. He cannot learn from you. So if you cannot be truthful to the students in front of you, and my students know, Mr. Cole does not play. He comes in there every day with the truth. And he's going to try to tell you in the fastest sarcastic way because he has to be right. He's going to tell you the truth, right? And then I think about leading our kids to independence, right? I have to give my mother and your mother and Black mothers all of the credit, and Black educators, because I've had some Black teachers who
Yes.
gave me the framework I needed. But I also have to remember that my mother and your mother, they
Hmm.
taught us to be independent, and they taught us to be independent early, right?
Yes.
And my mother is not an educational scholar, but my mother told me that I need to go out and work for everything that I have. And she taught me that I need to understand my self-identity. She didn't
Hmm.
put it in those words, but she allowed me to go out and be able
Yeah.
to find my own self-identity, right? So I have to give thanks for that. And that's my job as a teacher, to push my kids out of the nest, to let them be able to still use their creative thoughts and and fly, right? Like, I want my kids to be better than me, right? Like, that's the hope of every generation before us. Hopefully that we
Right.
wanted the next generation to be better than us. And lastly, I have high expectations. I remember Sandra Blunt. Now, that's my teacher from Clark Central. Miss Blunt would say, it's not about me going down to you, it's about you coming up to me. I have such high expectations of my kids, but the one thing that and she didn't say it, but I know she always provided, we have to provide our kids the things that they need to get to wherever they need to go, right? So when I look at my kids, not just my kids who are in special needs, or who have disabilities and have deficits, because those kids also have very big strengths too.
Yes.
But all of our kids need tools to be able to access the education that they need. And we have to be there to provide that so they can meet our expectations, so they can rise to our expectations. So those are the things that me as a teacher, like, those are the different roles that I have as a teacher. And
Wow.
that's the outlook that I have to getting my kids to where I need them to be. And that took a lot, but I wrote that down and I wanted to say
No, but
it.
I think it needs to be said, because all too often we have people who are in education and who are in front of our children who, like you said, they turn them off of education, and they do it at an early age, because I can't remember when Dr. Love, she mentioned in her book, I think maybe King was in the 5th grade. So you're turning this child off in the 5th grade. What happens the rest of his career? And then you turn and you say he has behavioral issues. Well, he's not learning. He's frustrated. He has to get that out somewhere. And I think that's what we see all too often when we overlook the feelings and the thoughts of a child, because kids are eager to learn. Kids like learning and talking to you about stuff. That's why you have kids that always ask, why is fill in the blank? And they will go on with why all day long, but for them, it's their inquisitive minds trying to learn and comprehend. And so it can be turned off by educators. And I think all too often it does, which even kind of leads me back to our cultural conversation. When we have teachers in the classroom who can't identify with, who can't relate to, who can't respect, who can't understand the different cultural differences that kids may bring, and they want them to fit into a box to fit their classroom style, that's nerve-wracking for me as an adult, for me as a aunt, for me as a cousin. That's very nerve-wracking, disturbing. What are some of the things that you would say, just even one, what's one tip that you say, here's the thing I've found to kind of hopefully tap into some kids? Doesn't reach everybody, but you've seen that it's touched a child. What's one of those things that you've picked up on?
The simplest thing that I've learned to connect with my students is by saying hello to them in the morning.
Wow. Wow.
Because how are you going to reach a student that you cannot simply say hello to?
Hmm.
Every day in the morning, because I start off with ninth graders, they come into my classroom and I speak to every one of them individually. Because you see that I see you, right? And our kids need to be seen. And, so many times they don't get a hello in the morning at home, right? Like,
Mm,
just these simple pleasantries that make you know you're seen, right? That's so
right.
important, especially to kids, like you said, who get easily turned off, because for so many years we have took a cookie cutter in the shape of education
Yep.
and tried to fit all of our kids in it. And there is not one cookie cutter education that fits all kids,
Right.
excuse me. And we have to be every day pushing. Like, as a teacher, a lot of people don't know. They feel like teachers are spoiled, right? I thought it was, an easy job too when I got into it, but I didn't realize that even though we have summers off, we work. Some people work 18, 19 hours a day, right? Because you have your work that you do inside of the classroom, but then you have to plan lessons. And a lot of people don't know, when I went to school, special education was downstairs, right? When I went to Clark Central, special education was downstairs. Now, all of our kids are learning together, right? And they're all in the same classroom. So when I prepare a lesson, I have to prepare a lesson for my kids at the top and my kids at the bottom and all the kids that are in the middle. So when I plan, I have to plan a lesson for every student, right? Because my goal is to reach every student, right? Like, I'm passionate about the work I do, and I I didn't get here. I got here by God's path, right? Because there is no other way that I could have become a teacher, right? I spent many years working in a bank. I was fine with that. God kicked me out of that, right?
Right.
And he said, "I got something for you. You don't yet know how you're gonna get there, but I got something for you, right?" So this work that I'm doing is so important to me, and teachers, like, I want to take a moment to applaud them, because I never knew that the work was it's so much work, right? And you need to think back, those teachers who were preparing for you, like, it's not an easy thing. So work.
Yeah, work. Um, you said something that I think so many people don't realize. We talk about the term special education a lot, and well, I remember in school when we identified it, it was usually talking about kids who are in some type of remedial class. And I apologize if I'm not politically correct when I say things, but that's where it is in my head and how I remember it and translated it. But also, I do know that special education also is defined as spectrum, and we didn't talk about it the same way. Those were the smart kids, and then you had the special ed kids when they all were in some type of special education, because like you said, they would get pulled out from our normal classrooms and go somewhere else, and then they would learn something totally different, and maybe it was at different levels. But now, as an educator, you're saying we're all combined in the same class, and you have to prepare these lessons at different levels. Do you think that, and do you see even some of your colleagues, and even not just necessarily in your classroom, your school building, but just across the country from, again, a global education standpoint, do you think your colleagues are able to unlearn some of those bad habits that they have had for so long that they were taught to now come back and reapproach education in a different way?
So first, I want to start out by saying, when you refer to the spectrum, you're talking about the autism spectrum,
Mm,
or autism disorder spectrum, and that's specifically one type of student that has special needs, or it's
hmm.
many kids that are on the spectrum,
Right.
but you have many other disabilities that we have to address needs for. So special ed, it deals with the kids who have all kind of needs, and our most advanced kids, right? We have exceptional kids who the classroom, they blow that out the water, right? Like, but it really is what special education is now is writing a recipe for all the things your student needs to get them to where they're going, right?
Mm,
So
interesting.
we looked at special education when I was in school as a bad thing, but now it's really just addressing the needs of the student and making sure they have what they need.
Yeah.
So on to unlearning, right? I just had the New York City's teachers, they had a whole day of professional development. We have it 3 times a year. It's called Chancellor's Day. And today, not the chancellor, but under him is a superintendent. It's not like Clark County,
Right.
we're the largest school district in the world
Right.
or in the United States. And so our superintendent had a culturally responsive session with
Mm,
Goldie Muhammad, right? And it talked about, she ended on this. She said that sometimes we have to go through a process of unlearning.
hmm.
It blew me away. I was like, wait, whoa, whoa, whoa. What you talking about unlearning? But if you think about it, we've had to unlearn a lot of things, right?
Hmm.
we can go back to Christopher Columbus. When I was in school, Christopher Columbus sailed the ocean, blues, whatever that story is. He found the United States or the Americas. Well, we have since found out that that is not true. We have also found out that Pluto is not a planet.
Right,
We've
right.
also found out that there is more than one order of operations to solve math problems, right? All y'all people on Facebook thinking y'all can solve the math problem and get it wrong because there's multiple means. And so you have to know what the current knowledge is, right? Because as I was telling you before we started, Michelle, education is ever happening, right? It was a struggle for me because I said before I went into education, I was like, I'm not going back to school. I got a master's degree. I didn't want to, I forced my way through that. But then to be an educator means that you have to engage in learning a lifetime, right? Like it's a lifetime process. And if you are going to be an educator and you're not willing to engage in that process, then you don't need to be in that profession. Because I'm a math teacher, right? And when you talk about kids being turned off, math is the number one thing that they're turned off to, right? We have so many kids who are math illiterate. It is a problem for a student to be illiterate in reading, but we make it okay to be illiterate in math, right? But
You
that's
know, I
because
know. Oh.
that's because they probably experienced one of those teachers that you're talking about,
Yeah.
right? That wasn't willing to unlearn the things the way that they learned them and wasn't able to shift their understanding of how to teach kids. And in the classroom, we have a lot of work to do, right? Like, I can't just teach one way. I have to teach multiple different, it's called multimodal. I have to teach multiple ways because some of my kids learn visually. Some of them learn from hearing. Some of them have to put their hands on it. They're tactile, right? Like they need to put their hands on it to learn it. And if we're not able to do that kind of work, then again, you shouldn't be in the profession. And I'm so passionate about it that I have to say it that way. So I don't know if that answered your question, but like unlearning is a process that we all need to take part in because I don't care if you're not even in education. Things are changing. Things are evolving.
Right.
You have to be willing to be open. And as a teacher, we have to be most flexible.
So, thank you so much, Wayne Cole, for joining us tonight. We're going to wrap up, and I'll give you the last word. Is there anything that you want to say in regards to education, or even just leave a look? I would say leave a jewel, drop a jewel for some other educator who is listening to this that may not be aware of how to deal with the King Johnsons in their classroom, or that they may not understand that unlearning is a process that they're going to have to go through as well as education, society, and as we continue to evolve. Any words that you want to leave?
Oh my God, that's so hard. Because again, like I said all day, I've been thinking about stuff and my mind is full of thoughts about education. But the biggest thing that I can say is be willing to go to your kids humbly, be honest with them, and meet their needs. Find ways to meet their needs. And to those people who have kids, those people who don't have kids, support public school education because education for me, I'm like you, Michelle, and I believe that education is the only way we're getting to the next level.
Yeah.
And we have to continue to invest in that and continue to invest in Black history because a lot of times Black history does not get involved in our curriculum, like they leave it out. And the kids need to know those stories, right? They need to know those stories.
Yeah. And you brought me to a great end because Black history is why we are here tonight. We're having 19 days of Juneteenth, and so this is Thrive Thursday. So in order for us to thrive and us to grow, we're doing education as a topic for this week. But we also have tomorrow night where you can join us with Figured Out Friday. That's gonna be, I'll warn you now, it's gonna be a little heavier conversation. We're gonna be talking about what's going on in today's world from a legal standpoint. We'll have attorney S.K. Alexander, who's out in Texas, joining us for that call. He's a defense attorney. So yeah, we're friends. But we're going to be having a conversation about where we are now, but how is he seeing the system transcend and move through this space, right? And so Figure It Out Friday, we'll just start figuring out together. We will also then have our Saturday session, which will be Say It Saturday. who will be James Ricardo Smith, and we're going to talk about where the role of the Black church is right now when it comes to social justice. On Sunday, we have Soulful Sundays, and we do a Netflix watch party, so you don't have our interaction this way, but we can all be chatting in a Netflix live stream as we watch 13th. If you have not watched it, gather the family and folks in your household as we do social distancing. So everybody sit on their own seat on the couch. But make sure that we are combined together to have that conversation, because it will introduce to what we're going to do next week as well. We will always start off Mondays on a positive, fun note. With Move It Monday, we have a TikTok challenge that gets released. And so join in, you and your family, do your TikTok challenge as you post it. We'll announce that winner on Fridays as well. Teach It Tuesday, where we talk a little bit more about the history through a YouTube video. And we also have been leaving links for the 1619 Project for folks to listen at their leisure as well. So, and then we always wrap back up where we left off last night with Wealth Building Wednesday, and we're talking to local entrepreneurs. So we ask you, please join us for Juneteenth, our 19 days of Juneteenth. And I have to say that none of this would be possible without our sponsors. And so I'll pull them up right now just so you can take a look. So thank you to our sponsors, this Rashi's Cuisine, Northeast Georgia Business Alliance, as we continue to host the Narrative Marketing, myself at the Edward Jones office of Michelle Pearson, and our MOB online directory, so mobathens.com. If you are a small Black business in the Northeast Georgia area, we ask go log in to mobathens.com, sign yourself up. We want to be able to do business with you and support you. If you are a small business or even a growing business and you need support, the Northeast Georgia Business Alliance is here to help. So we invite you again, join us on that side of things. Wayne Cole, I say thank you again. Enjoy New York. Hope to see you soon, my friend. Good night.
Thank you so much.